All right, let's do this. Let's do this. Today it's gonna be dramatical. Why? Because a shitstorm is coming towards us. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not going to be pretty. It is not going to be pretty, and I hope to hell that you have been preparing and that you've been watching the news and you're actually preparing for what is going to come this winter. Because if I have to look in my crystal ball and have to do a prediction of what we're looking at and what's going to happen the next month, the next couple of months, then it's not going to look pretty. It ain't going to look pretty at all. So what am I talking about here? Well, I'm talking about mask mandates. I am talking about a new vaccination campaign. I'm talking about shops being classified as non-essential. I am talking about new school closures. I am talking about masks on public transportation. I am talking about people being laid off from their jobs because of the economic situation, because shops have to close. I am talking about all that shit. Because I fear for the worst, and what I fear is that this is going to happen again. It's coming back, and it's coming back this winter. Now, I'm maybe wrong about this. I may be wrong, and I hope that I am wrong about this, but I don't think so. I don't think I'm wrong about this. Absolutely not. I fear that this is going to happen, and that it's going to happen this year, maybe even this month, but at least the next couple of months. So you have to prepare for this. You have to be prepared for this, and you have to make sure that you can survive the next couple of months without access to supermarkets, without access to anything really, with your children back home, because they have to do homeschooling because the schools are closed, and working from home, and basically living off your own groceries, living off your own emergency supply, living off your own garden, all that stuff. We are gonna have to go through it again. This is what I fear, and this is what I am warning you about right now. And the thing is, I'm not just saying this. I'm not just it's not a feeling I have, right? It's not something that I just say and, oh, it might happen, or it might not happen. No, it's not a feeling I just have. It's not a feeling. It's something that I've based on the stuff that I read right now and what I see right now. And stuff like, the media putting it out there that, the numbers are rising again. COVID infections are rising again. And we've already seen, when you open your news feed, you already see articles asking, should we go back to masking? Should we go back to mandatory masking? We see this. We see that the whole propaganda train has been powered up again, is steaming up again, with articles talking about the rising COVID infection rate and the rising numbers. And should we do this? Should we mask up again? Should people go back from school again to do homeschooling? Should we do all this? Should we go through the whole same drama that we've gone through the past couple of years? We see this happening in the media right now in Europe. And it's not just that, it's worse than that, because if it was just the media, then you could say, media. They, of course, they report what the government wants, and they report what the politicians are thinking, but they're not actually the politicians who make the policies themselves, right? So as long as the politicians don't actually say anything, it's gonna be fine. It'll be fine. It should be fine. I mean, as long as the politicians aren't actually saying that, we need to do this, we need to go back to masking, mandatory masking, and homeschooling and all that shit, and non-essential shops and all that shit, then it's gonna be fine. Let's just see what happens. But the problem is, we've already seen the first politicians in Europe today. We've already seen them who have come out publicly and said that, we're really considering this. We are really, really considering that this is something we have to do because of the rising numbers, and we're gonna look at the numbers, and if the numbers rise too much, then we have to gonna go back to all that mandatory shit and the lockdowns and so on and so forth. This is what we were seeing today. We already see the first politicians in Europe who've come up with this shit that this is what they want to do. And we know, right, from experience, we know that if a politician says that I'm thinking about it, that's just code for we've already decided that this is going to happen. We've already decided that this is what we want and this is what we're going to do. And we're just trying to gradually introduce this, get you used to the idea that this is what's going to do, that this is what you're going to expect from us. And this is the new life, this is the new normal, and whatever you as a plebeian basically think about this, well, too bad for you then, because we, the European political elite, we have already made up our minds that this is what we're going to do. That's code for this. Thinking about it, considering it, looking at the numbers, that is code for we're going to do this whether you like it or not. And yes, the first politicians have already come out and said that they are considering this. Specifically, France's own Minister of Health, Mr. Rousseau. And no, he's not related, as far as I know, to the famous French philosopher, because this man clearly does not have the use of his brain. Mr. Rousseau, he said that he's considering this right now for France to reintroduce masking, to reintroduce mandatory masking. He has said that on the basis of the numbers, he is considering this. And we know that this is a problem because we also know that in the EU, if France does something or Germany does something, then the rest of the EU follows suit. Because so far, let's be honest about this, the EU is being ruled from Germany and from France, from Paris and from Berlin. That's just the way it is right now. It's not the way it's supposed to be. Because the European Union, the European project, is supposed to be for all European citizens, all Europeans. So we can work out our differences, basically. We can cooperate and make this continent free and fair for all. It's not just supposed to be a French-German project. But right now it is. And we need to change that. But in the meantime, we need to prepare for what's coming this winter. And what I fear that's coming this winter is new lockdowns and new mandates and the whole shit over again. So be prepared. That's my message for you. Be prepared. Because this thing's going to happen. It's going to happen worse and worse and worse. And we know, of course, also that, the EU and the EU bigwigs who basically set up this entire system and who keep pushing this and pushing this and pushing this sort of repression in this sort of autocratic system of you have to show your card everywhere, you have to show your Dom pass everywhere, you have to show your green carte sanité everywhere, you have to show your Ausweis everywhere. You have to identify yourself everywhere and wear the mark of the beast on your face, basically, just to be able to shop. We see that it's the EU that's actually pushing this. And we also see this, for instance, and this is also important because it's going to get worse and worse and worse. We're going to have new measures coming this winter. This is what I suspect. This is what I expect. And next year, 2024, we're going to have the next step in this program, which is also important to know, also important to realize, also important to keep in the back of the head. Next year, 2024, we're going to have the WHO Pandemic Treaty, which is being negotiated right now. It's being negotiated right now. Now, so as you know, the WHO, they're part of the UN. They're basically, let's be honest about this, trying to take over control of planet Earth and make everyone conform to their World Health Program. And to do that, they are currently negotiating a treaty, an international UN treaty, which is the Pandemic Treaty. And there is huge amount of discussion about this. There's huge amount of trouble with this as well, because the UN treaty, let me get some tea. This WHO treaty has some very worrying, problematic, troublesome aspects. One of these aspects is that under this treaty, the Secretary General of the WHO, the guy who's, currently Tedros, basically China's little, employee, let's call it that. A war criminal who committed horrible, horrible acts, dehumanizing crimes against humanity in his own country in Ethiopia. as a minister of that regime that was in power there. I believe it was like the Tigrinya Front or something like that, who is now the Secretary General of the WHO. This man, with this treaty in place, would get the power to unilaterally decide if something is a pandemic and if something is an emergency situation anywhere on this planet, anywhere on Earth. You would basically be able to look at any spot on Earth, any country, any city, any whatever, any location, and would say, yeah, based on the numbers that I alone have access to, and based on my personal judgment, I declare this an emergency situation, and the WHO can basically, on that grounds alone, can take over and do whatever the hell they feel like doing, just to curb the pandemic. That's one of the major problems with this treaty, that treaty could very well be fitted with that rule, that it could have that rule in it, that it could have that piece of legislation in it. Now, this is a problem. And the problem is also that we do not exactly know whether that is going to be like that, or whether it's going to be watered down, or whether it's going to be stronger than that. We don't know right now what the hell is going to happen. But that is the draft, the proposals that we've heard so far. Now, it might not happen like that, because that treaty is still being negotiated right now. And the treaty is mainly being negotiated between the European Union on the one hand, and the UK, and US, India, and China, and so on and so forth. All the countries in the world who are basically negotiating it. But you know who the big names are, right, who are doing this? The big names. I mean, a country like, I don't know, Bangladesh or whatever, or Burundi. Okay, officially speaking, they're probably negotiating this, but in reality, their voices are not going to be heard, because it's only the big dudes on the table who really have a voice in the UN. It's the Security Council, basically. I mean, the countries that have a seat on the Security Council, they rule this planet de facto. And even in subsidiary organizations of the UN, such as WHO, in the end, it's the big guys that matter, not the little ones, eh? It's not good, but that's the reality we have to deal with right now. So anyway, that treaty is being negotiated right now, right at this moment. And it's being negotiated between the big powers of this planet. You know, the big economic and military powers on this planet. And there's an interesting dichotomy right there. There is an interesting point of contention right there, because it appears, from what I hear and what I read, it appears that there is a bit of conflict between the two sides. It's a bit of conflict. They're not going in the same direction. They're not on the same page exactly. On the one hand, we have the EU and the UK who are pushing for a real treaty, a really strong treaty with lots of powers for the WHO, and also penalties if countries do not abide by the treaty and by the terms of this treaty. They really want a strong, mandatory treaty that if a country decides to not listen to the WHO, then they'll get sanctions or whatever, or something like that. They'll get punished for it. On the other hand, it seems that like non-European countries, specifically the US, India, China, Brazil, I don't know about China, but especially US, India, and Brazil, that they've said, thank you very much, but yeah, we're going to pass on that. It's a hard pass on that. We do not want a treaty that's binding. We do not want a treaty that has a penalty clause where we can be punished if we don't agree to the WHO. We just don't want that. Now, of course, you never know if this is really what the discussion is or not, or if that's just a smokescreen and they're really all on the same page and going in the same direction. You don't know. You never know what's really going on, right? But we need to look at what we can read and what we can see, what we can hear. And this is so far what I see and read and hear. So there seems to be a bit of a conflict of interests in those two camps. And what is really worrisome for us as Europeans, though, is that it is the EU which is pushing for the strict treaty with the punishment clause and the mandatory treaty conditions. They want a strict, strong treaty where the WHO can basically just take over whenever the hell they feel like it. That is what the EU is pushing for right now. The EU and the UK are pushing for right now. A strict, strong treaty that you can basically, as a country, cannot get out of. It would be the end of sovereignty, basically, of the sovereign nation, of the idea of the sovereign nation, or even the sovereign bloc, because we'd all be subject, if the EU gets its way in this, we'd all be subject to the whims and caprices of the Secretary General of the WHO. A man who, let's be honest about this, we cannot trust. He's proven this. Cup of tea. So we see that it's the EU which is pushing for this. And this is also not a surprise. This is not a surprise because we've already seen that it was the EU which went out of its way to organize the pass system, the COVID pass systems in Europe during the whole crisis. We have seen it. They were the ones who were doing the unified European COVID certificate system, digital of course, because everything has to be digital in the EU. Everything has to be digital in the EU. Because reality, for who, right? So we've seen that the EU has been pushing this digital system. They've worked out a digital system. And what's even worse though, in the meantime, the EU has donated this digital system, the digital COVID certificate pass, to the WHO. So they can implement this and roll this out across the entire Earth. The entire planet can be now confronted with this system of digital passes where you are not allowed to move from one country to another, from one European member state to another. You're not allowed to cross the border from one member state to another. You're not even allowed to go to the shop without your digital certificate. That is what they are trying to implement on Earth right now through the EU and through the WHO. It's a terrible thought. It's dystopian as shit. But this is what we're seeing right now. But it might not come. It might not come to this. It might not. There is a chance. I don't know how, if we've already lost, if we've already lost this fight or not. I don't know. I'm never ever gonna stop fighting this. I am never ever gonna give up my freedom and my liberty and my responsibility as well, because freedom without responsibility is anarchy, and I'm never gonna give up my personal responsibility. I'm never gonna give up my personal liberty as well. I'm never gonna give up. Never. But is this a decision that has already been made? I don't know. How can I tell? Or is there still hope that this is going to fall apart? That the contention between the two negotiating blocs, basically the US on the one side and the EU on the other, that it's not going to mesh, that they're not going to come to an agreement, and they're going to end up with no treaty at all, or a weakened treaty, watered down treaty, that's not going to really have any kind of balls to it. It might, because let's not forget that any treaty done by the UN, if a country decides to not agree to the treaty, to not hold itself to that treaty, then that treaty is meaningless, powerless. We can all say that we're not going to agree to this as a country. You can say that you're not going to agree to this and then just not do it. It's a possibility. It's absolutely possible. It happens all the time. And the UN in its turn can not really do anything about it much, because when it comes down to it, when it comes down to brass tacks time, when it comes down to really the nitty gritty, the point of the story, The UN doesn't actually have any power whatsoever. It's a debating club. It's a debating club and a fine way of laundering money. And that's pretty much it, right? That's pretty much it. But in the end, a UN treaty has no power whatsoever as long as the countries that have signed it, don't agree to that and just decide that, hey, why am I being held to this? Why do I have to do this? This is stupid. Let's just tear it up. We can do this, absolutely. And I think that we as Europeans should endeavor to take over Europe for sanity again and rip up these stupid treaties and basically take the EU out of the WHO and all its evil UN crap, UN organizations, which basically just launder money. So I think that we as Europeans need to take this as an opportunity to take over Europe, take over the EU for common people and common sense and like normality and just using your brain for a moment. I think that we really need to fight to restore some kind of democratic order to Europe where people can actually be heard when there's an issue that they are involved in, and that people can have rights that cannot just be trampled and swept under the rug when the government says that, it's really inconvenient, your rights, your human rights are really inconvenient right now for us, so we're just going to ignore it for the time being. I mean, we've seen this over the past couple of years, how often this has happened. But we as Europeans need to stand up and organize and get together and just work hard, work our asses off to restore Europe to normality and to humanity and to democracy and to human rights and to just plain common sense and to independence and all that good shit. We can do this, but we have to do this. And we have to do this because if we don't do this, well, what's the alternative, right? So keep this in mind. Just to wrap up, keep this in mind. Be warned. Be warned. This winter is going to be hard. This winter is going to be harsh. It's going to be the dark winter with masks back again, with vaccine campaigns in all the media, all the time, with homeschooling, perhaps, who knows, wouldn't surprise me. With working from home again, yeah, probably. I mean, if there's going to be masks, then that's the next logical step. With lockdowns, yeah, probably. Wouldn't surprise me one bit. Actually, I know that, we know that this is what they want, that this is what they're heading towards too. So be warned, and also be warned and stay informed about next year's pandemic treaty, which is going to go up before the World Health Assembly, which is basically WHO Parliament or whatever you like to call that, which is going to go up for the final vote and make sure. How can you do anything against this? Very simple. Write your damned representative. Write the politicians. Tell them you don't want this. Tell them you do not agree with this and you don't want this. Tell them that people can take care of themselves. Tell them that if you want people to not be sick, then mental health is also important, and healthy food is also important, and fresh air is also important, and giving your human rights away, giving your political rights away, giving your autonomy and your sovereignty as a nation away to the WHO is no cure. It is no cure for pandemics or diseases or whatever. No. So write your representative. Write your national representative, write your European representative, write the European Parliament, write the European Council, write the European Commission, write them all and tell them you do not want this and they should never agree with this, and that you will hold them responsible. We will hold them responsible As the European people, we will hold them responsible if they do it anyway. So this is my message. This is what I'm going to do. This is what you should do. And let me know if you're going to do it and what you've done and how you intend to disagree with this shit and how basically what you're doing. Tell me, because I really want to know, because action is important. Personal responsibility is important. And this is, after all, why I'm making these videos. Not because I like sitting behind the camera and just talking my ass off. No, because I am taking personal responsibility as far as I can to try and get this information and this contrary opinion out to the rest of Europe. So this is what I would like you to ask. And of course, what I also want you to ask, is also just to give a big thumbs up to this video. Subscribe to my channel, also very important, also very nice. I have a couple of playlists, by the way, which you might enjoy. I've got my European playlist, which is all European opinion, European news, which is what you're watching now. And also, of course, my modern European music playlist, because let's be honest, Europe is beautiful. Our languages and cultures are beautiful, and the music we produce is beautiful. But it's so hard to find with all that American crap on the radio all day. I mean, you open the radio and it's all just American pop, which is about nothing, which you can tell is basically made by ChatGPT or whatever, It comes out of a computer. It's completely formulaic. But in the meantime, Europeans themselves are making such beautiful art and music and so on and so forth, and everything that's worthwhile and that reminds us that Europe is actually a beautiful part of the world. So I also highly recommend that. In the meantime, don't forget to give a big thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and then I'll see you next time. I will see you next time.